everyone. In this video series we're going to look at some relatively simple queries, and this is something I'd like you to get really good at. It's that querying a database is a very important part of Access or database work in general. So we're going to keep it relatively simple, especially in this first video where we just have some basic queries. And here's the table. We have a table of collector clocks, so to speak, cuckoo clocks and whatnot. And we have a clock ID, which is like the primary key in this table, the clock name, the type of movement, whether it's a clock that you would wind every day or every 8 days, the price, the country it comes from, and then the date it was issued. So looking at the table design real quickly, we have a mixture of various data types. We have a currency item and also a date time item. So let's look at some problems here. Okay, let's begin with problem number 1. It's a very simple query. Our shopper would like to see a complete listing of all the clocks in the inventory, include all columns, fields in your result. Fields, you know what fields are by this point. Those are also referred to as columns in database talk. That's very common. So you'll hear me rattling off that term a lot, and it's really synonymous with the word fields. Okay, so let's go to our Create tab up on the ribbon. And this query is so simple, we could just whip it up with the wizard, but we're going to start using what we call the QBE window, or the Query by Example window. And let's go ahead and launch that through this Query Design button. Okay, so we're being asked to add a table to our designer, which we have no choice but to add the clocks table. Now, you can query from multiple tables, and you'll be doing that in your book right away. That is called join, J-O-I-N, like join the club, when you are querying from multiple tables. We're not going to do that in this scenario, but that's a very common thing to want to do. Okay, so anyway, I'm adding the clocks table. I'm going to stretch out the window so I can see all of the fields or columns. Note, I'm using the word columns even though they're not displayed as columns. They're still called columns. That word has a kind of a different meaning when you're talking about database. Okay, so I have some choices here. I'm supposed to show the user everything, no criteria, no sorting or anything like that. So I guess one of the easiest things I could do is just double click that star. And what happens is when you double click that star, that means give me everything. So when I run the query, you can see it's as though I'm looking at the original table. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. I'm going to go back to the query design, and I'm going to remove this so I can start with a blank slate. But if you want to remove a column from the grid down here, you can just edge in on it with your mouse, like from the top. I'm edging in from the top, and then when it becomes that downward black arrow there, then you can just do a right click and cut it, and that'll free up that column in the grid. So anyway, another choice you have for adding all of the columns to the grid would be to double click the title bar there, and everything will be selected. At that point you can drag it and drop it down below. So what's the difference between the previous technique and this technique? Well, let's say I do want to add criteria, or maybe I do want to sort the results. You can't do that when you do the star. The star is just give me everything, I'm not going to touch it, and you're fairly limited. So like I said, you have choices. I'm going to go ahead and hit the save button here, and we'll save this query as all clocks. Okay, let's look at problem 2. Our shopper would like to see a complete listing of all clocks in the inventory, hide the prices from the shopper, but show everything else. So this is very much like the last query. I am going to start from scratch. I could use that last query as a template, but I'm just going to start from scratch. It's not too much extra work here. Okay, once again, adding the clocks table. I'm going to, now at this point I really don't have a choice. I could do this. I can't do the star and hide the price column at the same time, so I'm going to have to do the double click on the title bar and drop everything down. Okay, so here we see the show row with all these check boxes, and by default they're checked. If I want to hide the price column, all I have to do is uncheck that box. We'll run the query, and as you can see, the price is hidden from the user. Okay, in the next video we will start adding some criteria to our queries.